everybody. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. It is your goth country girl in training, the spooky one who's always reading nasty things, and of course, your favorite dimple top mess here. Happy Hispanic Heritage Month. Though this video will probably not be out on time, event planner things always have to take place in October. It was just a very busy month for me. I wanted to take the time to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month because even though the celebration of the Latin slash Latina slash Latino slash Latinx community should not only be limited to a month only because achievements and successes can and will happen and should be embraced every day. So these books are personally some of my favorite because I feel like sometimes books, especially written by Latinas that are just starting out and smart ones, especially are ones that I'm still seeking out because I always need more of them. I want to see more people like myself who are Latina, proud, brown, and curvy. And don't get me wrong, because I found some books this year that are on my TBR that I want to read, and I will get to those in a minute. But with that being said, I'm going to start off with some books that are close to my heart because these are some of the ones that got me back into reading again and made me feel seen because I did grow up in the era where everything was in the world of pale, to say the least. I know that these are not the only books around, but these are always the ones that come to me, in my opinion, that matter a lot. So in this time of Hispanic Heritage Month. Yeah, it's late, but it's never too late to celebrate. And yeah, let's get into it. That being said, this will be a spoiler free review because I want to talk about aspects of the book that intrigued me and why I find it important no matter what time of the year it is. So, if any of these books caught your attention and you want to do a spoiler in depth review of these books, let me know in the comments down below. The first one on my list is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and it shortly summarized goes like this. Quote, set in 1950s Mexico, Mexican Gothic is the story of Naomi, a young woman who gets summoned to a small mountain mining town to check up on her ailing cousin who has recently been married off to a handsome and mysterious Englishman. End quote. And what I remember about this one is how much of a gothic this book has been for me. It has built up, it has tension and something eerie going on. During the time that I had read this, it was in my women's literature class at UC Davis. Hey, hey, go Aggies. And I had heard of this book, but honestly did not have the time to really devote to it. But we have the main character of Naomi, or Noiomi. It's like I'm so used to Naomi with Naomi, but this is Noemi. So bear with me, guys. So Noyomi is a woman who is ahead of her time because she is someone who is seeking education in the 1950s instead of settling for what was expected of her, which was essentially marriage and childbearing. Nope, she is a socialite who seeks to help her cousin out of her shitty marriage with a super racist family, all into eugenics and blood purity, but also just general terror twists. And I want to say a Edgar Allan Poe quality to it because it gets weird, creepy, and it has that haunted gothic manor feature that just makes everything more mysterious. And it really points out to you how far a person can go to save the people they love, both in a positive and negative manner. I know many of us have heard of this book, but I don't care. Book Talk should make it very more should make it more popular because it just can. I don't need to see any more of this coho bullshit. Which side note, real quick, I watch Amazon Prime on my own time at work, and Amazon was being a shady hoe because for two commercial breaks, all I got was get three box set of coho books, and I'm like, Amazon, you petty bitch. If you have seen my history, you know that I have bought The Skeleton King by Charity B, The Cat and Mouse Duo by H.D. Carlton, and a bunch of monster bait romances by C.M. Nacosta. You really think I want to invest into that type of writing? Anyways, back to Mexican Gothic. But that was just my short summary of it. If you want something with super creepy feels, a mystery, a thriller, and something that is more like based on the FMC and romance is kind of spilled to the side along with some historical fiction, then I would definitely recommend reading Mexican Gothic. Back to it. Next up on my list of my favorite Hispanic reads is I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erica L. Sanchez. You can say what you want about any of my other books, but this one was my baby when I was not in the best state mentally. I remember reading this one and feeling so attached and so emotionally cracked open because until then, I thought I was the only one who felt these kind of feelings. Growing up Mexican American with a mother who was really strict on me at the time, I had the expectations to be perfect. I had to have the perfect grades, the perfect reactions. I had to have like my guard up so easily to cover up my emotions because I felt that I could not go to anyone at that time. This book changed that in the best way possible. The short summary of Sanchez's novel follows Julia, a Chicago high school student, as she navigates trials and tribulations of following her dreams of becoming a writer, alongside the death of her sister, Olga, who might not have been quite as perfect as she seemed. Basically, after Olga's death, she was the eldest daughter. Julie and her mom already have a strained relationship, and reading that back now, those feelings I felt back then, Julia just getting it so right from arguments with her old fashioned mother who grew up in a different generation from Julia's. Her mother is in survival mode still because of the way her and her husband immigrated to the States. Then there's Julia who wants to pursue her dream and live her life, but sometimes the people who are closest to us who should be our biggest supporters, for the lack of better word, can also be our biggest haters. And I think we all feel that. We as readers see Julia and her mom's tension and Julia's depression. When I read this, it was literally the first time that I ever read about a Latina being depressed and really doing something about it. So honestly, if you want to read this book and not feel alone, I definitely recommend this one. I remember writing an email to the Erica L. Sanchez about her book, and here goes. Um, I wrote, quote, and all I wanted to say was thank you. Thank you for creating a character so real and beautiful and relatable in a way that doesn't make me feel alienated or feel like a total alien in a world where amas y sus hijas non inocentes actually exist. I used to have well, back at the time, I had a relationship like the way Julia has with her ma, you know, and, I was basically the gist of it was like, even though this was a fictional work, a fictional work of words and ink, it felt real and it made me feel less alone during a really hard time. And that is one of the most beautiful and comforting feelings in the world. And she and Sanchez actually ended up writing back saying, "Thank you," back to me, and honestly, I'm still sappy about this book, if you can't tell, but because still to its day, it's one of the few books that awakens my soul and doesn't leave me alienated, and that is one of the most beautiful things a book can do, is just not make you feel alone and actually sometimes help you identify your own feelings without it being you yourself, but you reading about it could sometimes, like, trigger that knowledge of it. Hopefully that makes sense, but, something like that. Alrighty, the next book in this list is also written by Erika L. Sanchez, which is Crying in the Bathroom, and it is her memoir. I just read this one this year, and I will say it is a bittersweet read. Like, it left me sad, but also hopeful. I think I could say it's one of the few books written where there is just pure raw honesty surrounding such serious topics and themes like depression, anxiety, and taking medication for those said topics. Also, sexuality. And it was just kind of a read reminding you of a big sister kind of coming clean with what has truly happened in her life. And also to show you that everything will be okay from one way to another. Keep in mind, I've grown up in a small country town where they still consider 25 years of age to be old. But in Crying in the Bathroom, it flips these old stereotypical standards that many of us Mexican Americans or Latinas being able to talk about sexuality, good times, and bad times. Sanchez calls that shit out in the beginning, which I love because damn it, we should own our own sexuality however the fuck we like. We are allowed to talk about complication with family and try to break those stigmas often parents try to put on us. You know, the ones where we see puras santitas and save ourselves from marriage kind of BS. Nah, Sanchez takes readers down her sexual escapades shamelessly, and I loved it. Every time I thought she had found the one, nope. Isn't that usually the case for things like this? We ladies or gents or people, other people always think a potential sexual partner could be the one. And nah, we all go through it one way or the other. We could sometimes want life to be like a movie or a certain show where we could all be the main character. Sometimes it really won't be like that. So that being said, Crying in the Bathroom, a memoir is a definite must read if you want the real nitty-gritty of one of my favorite authors and her life story in an unfiltered way that includes talks of feminism, sexuality, and other in-depth issues from relationships to abortions to finding a happier day in your life. Another memoir that I read this year that I personally don't think has garnered a lot of attention, although it is very much deserved, is another memoir called Andale Prieta by Yasmin Ramirez. Quickly summarized, is described as, quote, a beautifully open coming of age memoir by a Mexican American woman that doubles as a love letter to the tough grandmother who raised her, end quote. One thing that I really enjoyed about this book is the fact that not only is there a playlist, but also Ramirez let me know when to search for the song before the set scene came on. Before I started this channel, this is one of the books that got me started my swing of reading again and starting this channel. I talked about this book in the month of February on my Instagram because at the time, February is a month of love. For me, this book represents the love of family, especially since this book features a location very close to my heart, and it is my dearly loved El Paso, Texas. Mostly because even now, I still love traveling between there and California, but also the strong matriarchs in this family reminded me very much of my own upbringing with divorced parents and having a real close relationship with my own grandmother. She still very much is a tough woman, and she is definitely quick to point you out on your BS if it's there, but also my own mother, who is a baddie in her own right and who has raised my sister and I single handedly. That being said, it does a good job on also showing the trials and tribulations of love and being a woman in your 20s, trying to figure out both establishing a career and following a dream, even if it is too far away at the time. I think that writers get a hard rap because unless there's success in your writing, it's kind of looked down upon, and also trying to meet the real life responsibilities of establishing a responsible career and writing or another career that establishes something closer to what your dreams are. What made Andale Prieta stand out to me is a determination and showing readers that don't ever think one person ever has it pulled together. For example, at one point, Yasmin had a job at a department store that would bring her shmoney, but it didn't bring her happiness. And yes, it was in the city. Ideally, from the outside, it could have looked like she was living her main character life, but in reality, she was miserable and work had overtaken her life. But when she decided to quit and start over, that's when life started to go the better route for her. She went to UT El Paso, been there, beautiful campus, and started with the most randomest thing, which is cooking. But as Frank Sinatra's song goes, that's life. I found this relatable because I was a pre-med major for the longest time. But the thing is, I fucking suck at math. But what I found myself doing was always reading and joining the editors club for the college's magazines instead of studying my math. Needless to say, an English major was the way for me. Andale Prieta gives me hope because she is someone who is a community college professor but still managed to get her book published. It shows that it's never too late to pursue one's dreams, even with a later start, and that there is beauty in experiences and mistakes. I say this because both Erica L. Sanchez and Yasmin Ramirez both I think that I'm pretty sure, correct me if you're wrong, if they happen to be listening, but I'm pretty sure they were both in their like 30s when they finally started to have that success and that thriving. So that's why I really like I love my 20s of being my 20s, but I also am working towards something that's going to pay off, I hope. But, even starting something new in your 30s could lead to success, and I think that gives me a lot more hope because I feel like everything's always trying to be rushed in your 18s, your 20s, and if it's not there, then what are you doing? It's like, no, these women showed me you could have a later start in life and it will pay off. And with that being said, now that we're done with the sappiness of the badass women, let's get into other works of fiction. If you're someone like me who enjoys reading about magic, brujeria, and basically anything like practical magic by Alice Hoffman, which is still to this day one of my favorite books, and more on top of that, this book also has a circus and it gave me some big fish vibes, like the movie with romance. And of course, by this point, you're probably wondering what book I'm talking about. The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina by Zoraida Cordova, and I remember looking this one up because I wanted something with practical magic vibes, but make it Latin. The synopsis for this plot is, quote, the Montoyas are used to a life without explanations. They know better than to ask why the pantry never seems to run low, or why their matriarch won't ever leave their home in Four Rivers, not for graduations, weddings, or baptism, but when Orquídea Divina invites them to her funeral and to collect their inheritance. They hope to learn the secrets that she has held onto so tightly their whole lives. Instead, Orquídea is transformed into a ceiba tree, leaving them with more questions than answers. 7 years later, her gifts have manifested in different ways for Marimar, Rey, and Rhiannon, granting them unexpected blessings and powers. But soon a hidden figure begins to tear through their family tree, picking them off one by one as it seeks to destroy Orquídea's line. Determined to save what's left of their family and uncover the truth behind their inheritance, her descendants travel to Ecuador, to the place where Orquídea buried her secrets and broken promises and never looked back. This book alternates between Orquídea's past and her descendants' present. End quote. It balances between the magic that lies in the past, generational trauma, and healing with it in the present. There is definitely a mystery in this one because we as readers are taken in the journey of Orquídea's past. And I might reread this one just for spooky season, what's left of it because at the time I was not doing in-depth reviews and I remember this book held my attention the entire time. Like when I wasn't working or cleaning, I was reading this book because Orquídea is the main matriarch of the family. This woman leads her family, sometimes with good and sometimes a little bit more of the iron fist. Keep in mind, this woman was married 5 times with children, so at the beginning to keep track of where the siblings and children lie because they will each be referenced in the story that at some point. There's also a map of the family tree in this book, I remember. Anyways, basically, the three main characters that I reference are Marimar, Ray, and Rhiannon. Each have to figure out who's taking down their family members while also trying to figure out their own magical powers and what it means to each of them being in the family and who exactly they are mourning question mark or not mourning, you know? Anyways, I don't want to spoil too much because also be prepared to cry because every character from Orquídea down to Marimar have a common theme of trying to make or find their own path and home, traveling sometimes by foot, train, or what have you to attempting so far to go to a new country, to have a new home and establish roots somewhere after being on the road so long. So that is some of the themes within this book. I think if you have read this book, tell me what you guys thought of it. Any other things I didn't notice in this book. I really liked it for the vibes it gave, the mystery. It was very intriguing for me. Alrighty, next on my list, With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. Let me set the scene on this one. I remember reading this one when I was super freshly single. And part of my mantra then, as it is now, was to always get to know myself a little bit better. This is the book I took with me on my first solo date, and it was the terrifying task of eating in a public restaurant on my own. And I feel like I've said this for every one of those books, but this one was also one of my favorites. Quick summary of this goes, quote, with her daughter to care for and her abuela to help support, high school senior Emily Santiago has to make tough decisions and do what must be done. The one place she can't let her responsibilities go is in the kitchen, where she adds a little something magical to everything she cooks, turning her food into straight up goodness. Still, she knows she doesn't have enough time for her school's new culinary arts class, doesn't have the money for her trip to Spain, and shouldn't be dreaming of someday working in a real kitchen. But even with all the rules she has for her life and all the rules everyone expects her to play by, once Emily starts cooking, her only real choice is to let her talent break free. End quote. This one was such a feel-good read because sometimes if you know, you know, there's nothing more than I enjoy. That was really repetitive, but bear with me. If you know what like to read, basically, you know there is nothing more that I enjoy than being able to see a main female characters who are unapologetically themselves, even who many look down on sometimes. For example, for me, I had seen teen pregnancies in my small town, and I remember my high school having a daycare center at one point just before I entered. I remember everyone would always hate on the girl specifically without fail. But just because someone has lived their life one way at the moment doesn't mean it's the end of the world either. So the book with Sapphire on High takes away from that stigma of teen pregnancies in a lighter tone, focusing solely on Emily and the way she still pursues her dreams in regards to cooking. Well, at first, not really. But cooking in her case is a talent. This book also shows and demonstrates the importance of teachers and mentors because though there is a teacher and student that is on pretty good terms, it also shows the challenges of the culinary world. And alas, every teacher has to challenge a student. In other words, even though Emily is about being creative in her meals, it also shows how much people love her food. The culinary industry is also about professionalism and making sure to stick to a recipe because while creative pursuits are cool and all, you have to be aware of the technicalities and such lying elsewhere like the allergens and all that fun stuff. Trust me, I know. I worked in the culinary industry for a while both as an event planner and organizer, and just missing one allergen on a menu absolutely had to be re edited and then brought out to the public. Without giving away too many spoilers, if you're looking for a character that has rawness, sass, and toughness from not coming from a perfect life, I recommend this book to you. If you're someone who has worked to prep to work in the culinary industry, this one's for you. Even though this story is a fiction, it's about a teenager coming to terms with being a young mom, co-parenting with a father of her baby, supporting her abuela, and attempting to pursue her own dreams in a culinary space. The importance of food and connection, especially in a Latin household, because I can't tell you how many times a good sopa de fideo takes me back to Texas and my own grandmother cooking in her kitchen with her own 60s pajamas on that paid the bills while all of my family would eat and take afternoon naps at the same time, just so we could wake up in time before the desert sunsets in Texas. I feel like a lot of us, especially the eldest daughter, can relate to being a caregiver and mean support or brunt or therapist, if I'm being honest, of people's problems. But this book shows the importance of also following your own dreams and putting yourself first. So that being said, what books by Mexican Americans or even for Hispanic Heritage Months would you recommend for me to read? Which ones have stuck out to you the most? What are your favorites? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you're still around, thank you so much. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week and thank you so much for listening.